Ever feel like you've already explored every corner of 1970s cinema, only to realize you've been chasing sequels and superheroes? Think again. Buried beneath the decade's gloss are razor-sharp thrillers, haunting dramas, and mind-bending experiments that slipped under the radar. Today on Golden Age Classics, we unearth 15 of the most underrated movies of the 1970s you simply must watch. From conspiracy-soaked paranoia to poetic road trips, prepare to expand your cinematic horizons and reignite your passion for film. The Parallax View, 1974. From its very first scene, an assassination on top of Seattle's Space Needle, the Parallax View grabs you by the collar and never lets go. What starts as a political murder evolves into something more serpentine and sinister, a vast conspiracy lurking beneath the polished veneer of American democracy. Warren Beatty plays Joseph Frady, a rumpled, disillusioned reporter who stumbles upon a mysterious organization that seems to recruit political assassins. As Frady inches closer to the truth, the question becomes not who's behind it, but is he the next target? Alan J. Pakula, fresh off directing Clute, delivers the second entry in his unofficial Paranoia trilogy, and he's in full control of tone, mood, and dread. Pakula doesn't serve answers on a silver platter. Instead, he leaves breadcrumbs, trusting the audience to follow Frady's descent into the shadowy labyrinth of institutional power. The silence in this film is deafening. You begin to notice everything. The way a janitor lingers too long in a hallway. The way an elevator opens just a beat too early. Cinematographer Gordon Willis, yes, The Godfather's Prince of Darkness, paints Frady as a speck in a towering concrete jungle. Frady is visually crushed under modernist architecture, framed in negative space, and shadowed by anonymous figures. Every shot feels like it's watching him back. That famous psychological montage, the fake recruitment video, isn't just unsettling. It's a disorienting crash course in manipulation, propaganda, and the dark power of imagery. This wasn't just a thriller, it was a warning. Production-wise, Pakula fought to preserve the film's elliptical style. Studios wanted exposition. He wanted ambiguity. He won. And it's that choice that elevated the film from a procedural to a philosophical gut punch. Composer Michael Small, often unsung, delivers a score that beats like a quiet anxiety attack. Piano refrains throb under scenes of otherwise mundane conversation, escalating your sense that nothing is safe, no one is clean, and that Frady's pursuit of truth might be a death sentence. Critics were mixed upon release. Some admired the style, but found the storytelling cold. Yet today, The Parallax View is widely regarded as one of the most prophetic films of the 20th century. Long before The X-Files, long before Snowden on WikiLeaks, Pakula tapped into a universal fear. What if the real enemy isn't out there? It's above us, watching silently, waiting. Sorcerer, 1977. Sorcerer is a film that doesn't ask for your attention. It grabs it by the throat and dares you to look away. Director William Friedkin, hot off the global success of The Exorcist, chose this gritty, dangerous remake of The Wages of Fear as his next passion project. But instead of playing it safe, he plunged headlong into chaos. The result? A slow-burn masterpiece soaked in sweat, oil, rain, and existential despair. The plot is deceptively simple. 4 criminals from different corners of the globe, each haunted, each on the run, find themselves hiding in a hellish South American village. Their salvation? A suicide mission transporting unstable dynamite through mountains, rainforests, and collapsing rope bridges. One wrong jolt, one mistimed breath, and it all goes up in flames. But it's not the explosions that make this film terrifying. It's the dread of what's coming next. Roy Scheider leads the cast as Jackie Scanlon, a New Jersey getaway driver turned desperate exile. Forget the hero from Jaws. Scheider is worn, skeletal, and hollow-eyed here, delivering a performance of such raw intensity, it's hard to believe he wasn't actually losing his mind during filming. Friedkin chose authenticity over comfort. The shoot in the Dominican Republic became infamous for mudslides, disease outbreaks, near deaths, and collapsing sets. One bridge scene alone took 3 months to film, costing nearly $1 million. Yet, when you see that truck teetering over a gorge, every dollar feels well spent. Tangerine Dream's pioneering electronic score is the soul of this film. Ominous, pulsating, it creates a soundscape that's alien yet organic, a heartbeat echoing in a place where nature and fate are equally merciless. You feel like you're drifting through a purgatory where hope itself is a liability. Sorcerer was doomed at the box office, released just weeks after Star Wars changed cinema forever. Audiences weren't ready for a film so bleak, so uncompromising. It was dumped in theaters with little promotion, buried under the expectations of Friedkin's previous hits. But over time, cinephiles came to treasure it. Scorsese called it one of the greatest films ever made, and Tarantino sings its praises. The Long Goodbye, 1973. Philip Marlowe never looked like this before. Gone is the tough-talking gumshoe in a fedora. Robert Altman's The Long Goodbye gives us Elliot Gould as a chain-smoking, mumbling, perpetually bemused private eye who feels completely out of place in sun-bleached post-hippie Los Angeles. But that's the point. This is film noir after the dream soured, a genre turned inside out and dressed in shaggy hair and supermarket cats. Based loosely on Raymond Chandler's novel, the film follows Marlowe as he investigates the disappearance of a friend, an investigation that leads him into a mess of betrayals, corrupt psychiatrists, mobsters, and wealthy manipulators. But plot is secondary here. Altman's genius lies in atmosphere and character. He drops Marlowe into a California that feels surreal, like a dream on the verge of unraveling. There's a haze over everything, from the morning fog to the moral ambiguity of every encounter. Elliot Gould's Marlowe is the soul of the film. He's out of step with the times, like a man sleepwalking through a world that stopped making sense. He talks to his cat, mutters to himself, and never quite seems to connect with anyone. Yet there's a quiet brilliance in his detachment. He's the one honest figure in a world built on lies. Altman's direction is loose, alive, and utterly modern. He uses zoom lenses, layered dialogue, and long, fluid takes to create a world that feels spontaneous and uncontrolled. Composer John Williams, with a pre-Star Wars score, cleverly reimagines the title tune in different styles, from cocktail jazz to Mexican mariachi, emphasizing the film's slippery tone and shifting identities. At the time, The Long Goodbye confused critics and alienated traditional noir fans. But over the years, it's become a beloved cult classic and one of Altman's most celebrated films. Quentin Tarantino even called it one of his favorites, and you can see its DNA in everything from Inherent Vice to Under the Silver Lake, TwoLane Blacktop, 1971. There's no plot, no destination, and the characters don't even have names. And yet, TwoLane Blacktop may be the most hypnotic road movie ever made. Directed by Monty Hellman, it's a stripped-down, meditative film that turns the American highway into an existential void, where identity, purpose, and ego dissolve like heat off asphalt. James Taylor, the singer, and Dennis Wilson play the driver and the mechanic, two car junkies roaming the American Southwest in a souped-up '55 Chevy. They race for cash, sleep in their car, and barely speak. Along the way, they pick up a drifter girl and challenge a blabbering, insecure man in a GTO to a cross-country race. But racing is just the excuse. The film is really about how aimless and rootless this generation had become by the early 70s. Hellman directs with a zen-like patience. The film unfolds in silence, long shots and empty landscapes. The dialogue is sparse, often mundane, but every pause, every stretch of highway becomes a canvas for the viewer's own thoughts. It's a cinema as open space. What makes TwoLane Blacktop so radical is its refusal to satisfy. There's no character arc, no resolution. Even the race becomes irrelevant. The film ends with the image of the film itself burning in the projector. Cinema literally eating itself. It's a quiet rebellion against Hollywood storytelling and an aching tribute to a country in search of meaning. Ignored on release and virtually buried by Universal, TwoLane Blacktop gained cult status through midnight screenings and bootleg copies. Today it's preserved by the National Film Registry and championed by everyone from Richard Linklater to Jim Jarmusch. The Conversation, 1974. Before the digital age, before smartphones, before Alexa could eavesdrop on your kitchen chatter, there was The Conversation. Francis Ford Coppola's haunting meditation on surveillance and guilt is not just one of the best films of the 1970s, it's one of the most eerily prescient ever made. Gene Hackman plays Harry Call, a surveillance expert hired to record a couple in a San Francisco plaza. But as he isolates their words, "He'd kill us if he got the chance," Harry begins to suspect he's inadvertently uncovered a murder plot. What follows is a psychological spiral, as Harry's obsession with privacy consumes him. Hackman is incredible. His Harry is buttoned up, emotionally shut down, yet you can feel the fear bubbling under the surface. He's a man who trusts machines more than people, and yet those very machines betray him. The subtlety of his performance, the way he hesitates before answering a phone, the way he adjusts his glasses, is heartbreaking. Coppola, in the middle of working on The Godfather Part 2, self-financed this smaller, quieter film. And it's a masterpiece of sound design. Walter Murch layers conversation, street noise, and silence with surgical precision. The more we listen, the less we understand. That's the genius. The film's climax, a tape recording that suddenly reveals a new meaning, is one of the most gut-wrenching rug pulls in cinema. And the final image of Harry tearing apart his apartment, searching for a bug that may not even exist, that's loneliness distilled to its purest, most paranoid form. It won the Palme d'Or at Cannes and was nominated for Best Picture the same year Coppola also won for Godfather 2. Talk about a flex. The Last Detail, 1973. What happens when honor, duty, and rebellion crash into each other on a cross-country road trip? In The Last Detail, director Hal Ashby fuses military rigidity with off-the-cuff freedom, crafting one of the most raw and bittersweet buddy films of the 1970s. And at the center, Jack Nicholson, unleashed, electric, and utterly unforgettable. Nicholson plays Billy Badass Badusky, a Navy lifer assigned to escort a young sailor, Larry Meadows, to prison for stealing a paltry $40 from a charity box. What should be a routine detail turns into a wild odyssey when Badusky and his partner Mule decide to give Meadows one last taste of life before he's locked away for 8 years. What follows is a series of bawdy adventures, bar fights, hotel rooms, and awkward goodbyes, all set against a backdrop of systemic indifference. Ashby, who had just come off the countercultural gem, Harold and Maude, captures the spirit of disillusionment that ran through the 70s like a fault line. His direction is loose, letting scenes breathe and the characters evolve naturally. Nicholson, in particular, rides this freedom like a storm, cursing out MPs, philosophizing about life, and laughing with a kind of manic sincerity. It's one of his finest performances, somehow tender and volcanic all at once. But the heart of the film lies with Randy Quaid. As Meadows, he's heartbreaking, a soft-spoken, timid kid who's never had a real chance. His vulnerability makes the film's premise even more tragic. You feel the injustice of it all, and the cruel machinery that crushes a person over a minor mistake. The Navy hated the film, and so did the Department of Defense. They refused to cooperate with the production. But that only fueled Ashby's independent spirit. The film's language, improvisation, and unvarnished realism were groundbreaking. Electrolide In Blue, 1973. It's Easy Rider in reverse, a story not of outlaws fleeing the system, but of a man who believes in the system and slowly watches it crumble around him. Electrolide In Blue is one of the most visually arresting, emotionally haunting films of the 70s, and it came out of nowhere, directed by music producer James William Guercio in his only cinematic effort. The plot follows John Wintergreen, a short-statured, idealistic Arizona highway patrolman who dreams of becoming a homicide detective. After discovering a suspicious suicide in a desert shack, Wintergreen believes he's found his big break. But as he climbs the ranks, he's confronted with bureaucracy, corruption, and the sobering truth that idealism doesn't always pay. Robert Blake delivers a stunning performance, stoic, intense, and filled with quiet yearning. Wintergreen is a man caught between identities. He wants justice, but he also wants to belong. The closer he gets to power, the more that power begins to hollow him out. Guercio, though inexperienced as a director, had an eye for poetry and imagery. Working with cinematographer Conrad Hall, he crafted breathtaking compositions, desert highways that stretch into infinity, police motorcycles gleaming in the sun like chariots, and close-ups that linger just long enough to make you uneasy. It's one of the most beautifully shot films of the decade, period. The film's musical DNA is unmistakable. Guercio scored it himself, blending rock, country, and experimental sound design into a score that mirrors Wintergreen's mental descent. There's a sadness in every strum and echo, a sense that the American dream is burning out like a flare on asphalt. Ignored by MGM and shelved soon after release, Electrolide In Blue became a cult favorite years later, thanks to film students, VHS hunters, and noir obsessives. It's a uniquely American tragedy about loyalty, illusion, and the cost of believing in something that may never believe in you. The Friends of Eddie Coyle, 1973. Boston has never looked colder, more dangerous, or more soul-crushing than in The Friends of Eddie Coyle. Robert Mitchum stars as Eddie, a tired small-time gun runner who's been doing shady deals for decades and now just wants to stay out of jail and survive. But in this world, there are no friends, only users, rats, and the quiet thud of betrayal. Director Peter Yates crafts the film like a piece of street poetry. There's no glamour, no slick capers, no shootouts in slow motion. Just cheap bars, smoky diners, and back alleys where deals are whispered through clenched teeth. Mitchum's Eddie is a broken man trying to stay one step ahead of the law and the criminals who would gladly see him disappear. The dialogue, taken almost verbatim from George V. Higgins' novel, is pure gold. Every line feels lived in. Conversations about baseball or sandwiches are just as tense as those about snitches and hits. Mitchum underplays beautifully here. His heavy eyelids and gravel voice say more about disappointment than 100 monologues ever could. The supporting cast is pitch perfect. Peter Boyle, Richard Jordan, Stephen Keats. Each one brings a quiet menace, a sense that violence could erupt at any second. But what's most terrifying is how little it takes for a life to be destroyed. A name whispered to a Fed, a wrong turn at the wrong bar. At the time, audiences didn't quite know what to make of it. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but that was the point. Eddie Coyle showed crime as it really was, small, sad, and inevitable. Over the years, filmmakers like Scorsese, Tarantino, and Affleck have sung its praises. Its influence is everywhere, from The Departed to Killing Them Softly. Badlands, 1973. There's a stillness in Terrence Malick's Badlands that's more dangerous than gunfire. It's the calm of two kids driving through wheat fields with blood on their hands and stars in their eyes. Part love story, part American nightmare. Badlands is a debut so startling, so elegantly violent, it announced Malick as a visionary from frame one. Inspired by the real-life 1958 killing spree of Charles Starkweather and Carol Ann Fugate, Badlands follows Kit, a brooding garbage collector with James Dean charm, and Holly, Sissy Spacek, a 15-year-old girl living in quiet despair. When Kit kills her disapproving father, the two flee into the heartland, leaving behind a trail of bodies and bizarre romantic delusions. Malick doesn't shoot violence with shock or judgment. He shoots it with eerie detachment. Holly's deadpan narration, more diary than confession, turns each murder into a child's misunderstood fairy tale. She talks about love and dancing as her boyfriend shoots a man in cold blood. It's this emotional disconnect that makes Badlands so chilling. Visually, it's a dream. Cinematographer Tak Fujimoto paints the American landscape with golden hour beauty. Cornfields, dirt roads, twilight skies, all rendered with the reverence of a nature documentary. But within that beauty lies rot. The violence doesn't feel explosive. It feels inevitable, like gravity pulling Kit and Holly toward the void. Martin Sheen is magnetic, equal parts charming and terrifying. He walks with a slow, casual gait that feels rehearsed, like Kit learned how to be human from a movie screen. Sissy Spacek brings innocence and eerie calm, her gaze always far off, like she's trying to imagine a happier life on the other side of the plains. Badlands premiered to quiet acclaim, nearly lost amidst louder fare, but its influence has been seismic. You can see echoes in everything from natural-born killers to true romance. Malick's philosophical voice, lyrical, curious, deeply attuned to nature, begins here, and it's unforgettable. Phantasm, 1979. Before Freddy, before Jason, before horror became a parade of slasher cliches, there was Phantasm. Don Coscarelli's no-budget fever dream still stands as one of the strangest, most imaginative horror films of its era. It's not just scary, it's otherworldly. A nightmare filmed in the key of nostalgia. The story follows Mike, a teenage boy grieving his parents and haunted by visions of the Tall Man, a ghoulish mortician who commands killer silver spheres and reanimates the dead. Along with his older brother Jody and their friend Reggie, Mike uncovers the terrifying truth behind the local mortuary, a gateway to another dimension. Phantasm is stitched together like a dream. Logic is thrown out the window in favor of mood, movement, and surreal dread. Hallways stretch like tunnels. Doors appear where they shouldn't. People vanish without explanation. And that's its power. It's not trying to make sense. It's trying to make you feel like you're trapped in a recurring nightmare. Coscarelli made the film for around $300,000, shooting in his hometown, using family members and friends as crew. And yet, the film's ambition dwarfs its budget. He creates an entire mythos with just fog machines, rear projection, and clever editing. The flying spheres, iconic. The dwarves in cloaks, pure nightmare fuel. And Scrim's performance as the Tall Man, towering, silent, occasionally whispering "booey," is bone-chilling in its restraint. The soundtrack, with its simple piano melody and synth overtones, evokes both dread and melancholy. It's no surprise it became a midnight hit. Audiences didn't just watch Phantasm, they experienced it. It made you feel like your own world could fall through the cracks at any moment. While it spawned multiple sequels, the original remains the most potent. It's not about gore or jump scares, it's about fear as an emotion, childhood grief, fear of death, and the helplessness of not being believed. For anyone who ever stared at a funeral home and wondered what might be going on inside after hours, Phantasm answers with a wink and a scream. The Wicker Man, 1973. Sunlight never looked so sinister. The Wicker Man isn't horror in the traditional sense. It's a slow, musical, almost cheerful descent into pagan madness. And that's what makes it terrifying. It doesn't try to shock you, it seduces you. Sergeant Howie, Edward Woodward, a pious Christian police officer, travels to the remote Scottish island of Summer Isle to investigate the disappearance of a young girl, but the locals deny she ever existed. As Howie digs deeper, he uncovers a community immersed in fertility rituals, harvest festivals, and an ancient religion older than the cross. The brilliance of The Wicker Man lies in its tonal dissonance. The film is bright, pastoral, filled with flowers and folk songs. Yet, the deeper Howie goes, the more that brightness begins to rot. Director Robin Hardy leans into the uncanny, shooting bucolic beauty with a lingering unease. The more the villagers smile, the more your skin crawls. Christopher Lee, in one of his most nuanced performances, plays Lord Summerisle, a charismatic cult leader with intellect and style. He doesn't threaten Howie, he charms him. He doesn't need to fight, his belief system is so complete, so ancient, that Howie's resistance seems almost quaint. Composer Paul Giovanni's soundtrack, filled with traditional Celtic melodies and sensual harmonies, makes the rituals feel celebratory, even as you realize what's coming. The music doesn't signal doom, it dances toward it. And then there's the ending, that towering effigy, that final cry. It's one of the most shocking climaxes in horror history, not because it's violent, but because it's inevitable. Howie, rigid in his beliefs, becomes a martyr not for his righteousness, but for his inability to adapt. The Wicker Man was buried by its own studio, released in chopped-up form, but cult audiences resurrected it. Now, it's regarded as one of the greatest horror films ever made, and one of the most psychologically complex. Stalker, 1779. There are films that entertain, and then there are films that challenge your soul. Stalker, Andrei Tarkovsky's hypnotic masterwork, is not meant to be watched. It's meant to be entered, slowly, carefully, like stepping into sacred ground. Set in a grim, post-industrial wasteland, the story follows three men, the writer, the scientist, and their guide, the Stalker, as they journey into the mysterious zone, a restricted area rumored to contain a room that grants your deepest desire. But this isn't science fiction in the Star Wars sense. This is metaphysical cinema. The real journey isn't through the zone, it's through the self. Tarkovsky transforms bombed-out factories, flooded tunnels, and overgrown rail tracks into a psychological landscape. Every long take, some lasting 10 minutes or more, demands your attention and your presence. The pacing is deliberate. It's not slow because it has nothing to say. It's slow because it has too much to say. Visually, Stalker is stunning. The film begins in sepia-toned bleakness, then shifts to rich, earthy color the moment the characters enter the zone, like stepping from despair into a dream. Every frame is a painting, every shadow a question. Eduard Artemyev's electronic score hums like distant thunder, barely there, but always felt. On set, the film was cursed. The original footage was destroyed by a lab error, forcing Tarkovsky to reshoot from scratch. He clashed with Soviet censors, battled illness, and pushed his actors through near-mystical levels of exhaustion. Some even speculate the film's toxic shooting locations contributed to Tarkovsky's early death. And yet, what emerged was unlike anything before or since. Stalker is not about the magic room. It's about what we think we want, what we're afraid to admit we want, and what we're willing to risk to find it. The zone doesn't test your strength, it tests your honesty. Performance, 1970. What do you get when you blend gangster cinema, gender fluidity, psychedelia, and a rock god in self-destruction mode? You get performance, a hallucinogenic grenade lobbed straight into the heart of 1970s cinema. Co-directed by Nicola Roeg and Donald Cammell, the film begins like a British crime thriller. Chaz, a violent enforcer for London mobsters, finds himself on the run after a hit goes bad. He hides out in a crumbling Notting Hill mansion owned by Turner, a reclusive rock star who hasn't left the house in years. What starts as a hiding place becomes a psychedelic pressure cooker, where identity dissolves and time unravels. James Fox, typically the stiff upper lip type, gives a career-best performance as a man, unraveling in the presence of chaos. And Jagger, well, Jagger doesn't just play Turner. He is Turner, seductive, sly, somewhere between guru and ghost. Their dynamic becomes a dance of dominance, curiosity, and dissolution. The editing, often mimicked, never duplicated, was revolutionary. Rogue fractures time, splices flashbacks into present moments, and layers sound in ways that feel more like jazz than storytelling. Mirrors, lights, guns, and rituals swirl together in a fever dream of violence, sexuality, and ego collapse. The studio was horrified. They chopped 40 minutes from the original cut, delayed the release for nearly 2 years, and even demanded reshoots. But despite the meddling, performance retained its power and its danger. Over the decades, it's become a sacred text for experimental filmmakers, musicians, and artists. You can see its influence in David Lynch, Gaspar Noé, and even music videos by Madonna and Nine Inch Nails. Johan, The Last Wave, 1977. Storms don't just rage in the sky, they rage in the soul. The Last Wave, directed by Peter Weir before his Hollywood years, is a haunting Australian fable about law, prophecy, and the collapse of Western logic in the face of ancient truth. Richard Chamberlain plays David Burton, a Sydney lawyer assigned to defend a group of Aboriginal men accused of murder. But as he delves deeper, Burton begins to suffer visions of floods, ancient rituals, and a drowned city. His rational mind begins to crack as he confronts a spiritual world that doesn't play by courtroom rules. Shot during torrential rains that seem to seep into every frame, The Last Wave is saturated in unease. The sky churns, the water rises, thunder echoes even in silence. Nature isn't just a backdrop, it's a warning. Weir, who would later direct Picnic at Hanging Rock and Dead Poets Society, shows early signs of his genius here. His camera lingers on wet pavement, faces half lit by lightning, and ceremonial markings etched into stone. Every image feels symbolic, yet nothing is explained. What's remarkable is the film's cultural sensitivity. Weir worked closely with Aboriginal consultants, bringing in real elders to portray tribal figures. Their presence lends the film a gravitas and a resistance to simplification. The mystery isn't there to be solved, it's there to be honored. Critics didn't know what to make of it. Was it a supernatural thriller, a courtroom drama, a climate prophecy? The answer is yes, and more. The Nickel Ride, 1974. We close our journey with a film that slipped through the cracks of American cinema, but lingers like a ghost. The Nickel Ride, directed by Robert Mulligan, is a quiet, slow-burning noir about deals gone bad, trust evaporated, and one man drowning in a city that never loved him back. Jason Miller, fresh off The Exorcist, plays Cooper, nicknamed the Key Man. He's a mid-level mob handler who manages warehouse space for stolen goods in downtown Los Angeles. When the syndicate decides he's no longer useful, the walls start to close in. But there are no shootouts here, no explosions, just paranoia, silence, and the creeping sense that something's wrong, and there's no way out. Mulligan, known for more genteel films like To Kill a Mockingbird, steps into gritty territory with grace. He paints L.A. not as a glittering playground, but as a labyrinth of locked doors, empty warehouses, and betrayal humming in fluorescent lights. Every scene feels like it's happening 1 second too late, as if fate already made its move. Miller's performance is devastating. Cooper isn't a killer. He's a negotiator, a middleman, a guy who always thought he had time. And now time's run out. His face, heavy-lidded, slumped shoulders, tells the story of a man realizing too late that loyalty is a myth in his line of work. Poorly marketed and dumped in a limited release, The Nickel Ride was forgotten almost instantly. But it's been rediscovered by cinephiles and noir historians who recognize its beauty, its patience, its quiet despair, its tragic dignity. If you made it this far, you're not just a movie fan. You're a cinematic archaeologist. You see the beauty in what others miss. These 15 films weren't made to be blockbusters. They were made to last, to be found, to change the way we see the world and ourselves. So, if any of these titles sparked your curiosity, drop a comment, hit subscribe, and ring that bell. Let's keep this conversation alive. Golden Age Classics will be back next week because the journey into forgotten cinematic gold never ends. Stay curious, stay passionate, and as always, keep watching.